Next up is Dems Abroad.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I will be presenting. So I'm Martha McDevitt-Pugh. I'm a California voter living in the Netherlands for the last 23 years. I'm one of the 9 million Americans who live abroad. We're a very diverse group, and I'm really delighted to be able to share a little bit about us today, and especially the opportunities and the challenges that we have in terms of voting in US elections. Let me get my slides up. I moved abroad for the best reason in the world, love, but also because of the Defense of Marriage Act. I wasn't allowed to bring my spouse into the United States legally as a family member. And I spent 12 years working to change that. And that made me a Democrat abroad and an activist. So there's a lot of stereotypes about people who live abroad. And we're also here today to show who we really are and talk about how it is to vote from abroad. So we at Democrats Abroad call ourselves the margin of victory. We're the untapped resource of voters, 6.5 million voters living abroad. We're part of the Democratic Party. We're the largest organization of civilian Americans living outside the United States, and we're volunteer run. We're in 197 countries. We have 46 organized country committees. We just finished our global presidential primary, where we were voting at more than 100 locations around the world in person, and we're just tabulating our results, and we've been around for 60 years. We came into existence after Americans abroad were actually granted the right to vote in US elections. So we're here to help Americans abroad vote, but also to protect the vote for Americans who live abroad. I think one of my main messages that I want everyone to take away today is that our voting is different. We vote by mail because we live in so many different locations, but our voting for mail is governed by a different set of laws. It's governed by the same federal laws that make it possible for military voters to vote. And so we have another set of rights, which we're very, very glad to have, that protect our right to vote. And we have some different timelines also for voting. We vote in September. We get our ballots 45 days before the election. And so we're always very eager to get Americans out early to vote and to request their ballots to make sure that they can return them in time from the very diverse locations that they live in around the world, and some of which are a bit challenging to get a paper ballot back into a state like Wisconsin or many other states that require. There's 22 states that require us to send a paper ballot back. Very challenging to do if you're in a state without a functioning postal service. So we're on the ground and we're there helping people who live abroad get their votes back. So let me just also walk through some of the other things that we do. We're organized in caucuses. Again, I mentioned we're a diverse community, so we have many of the same caucuses that exist inside the Democratic Party. We organize Americans who live abroad around a number of issues, and we also ensure that the constituencies in our organization reflect who we are as American people abroad. And we also have task forces. There are a lot of unique issues that impact Americans that live abroad. A lot of legislation gets written without really thinking about us. It's one of the reasons that we're so eager to always advocate for legislation that will work for us and that takes us into account. Equal Rights Amendment is one that's very close to the hearts of many people and Democrats abroad, but also being able to have access to Medicare. When you're outside the United States, you don't get to use the medical facilities under your Medicare. And we'd really like to see that portability. There's a lot of reasons why it would actually save the United States money if Americans abroad could actually access their Medicare in the countries that they live in. We've also done some really stellar work around reparations, where we have a task force around that. And taxation is a huge issue that impacts Americans when they live abroad. Again, we're often forgotten. Trump's $2 trillion tax giveaway really negatively impacted Americans with small businesses who live abroad. And so we're constantly working to try to make sure that laws work for all of us. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, Americans abroad in some countries had difficulty accessing vaccinations. So we're there to make sure that those issues get highlighted and they can get addressed. Of course, we vote back in the states that we last lived in. So I am a lifelong California voter, even though I've lived abroad for many years, and we care passionately about what goes in our our home states and where our friends and family live. And so we're also organized around state teams. Many of those state teams are in battleground states. So we have the opportunity that is really unique to mobilize Americans who live abroad to bring many more votes back into really some key elections. So here's a list of some of the states where we're organized to actually advocate for voting rights in those states, and also to make sure that the issues that really matter, all the down ballot issues, are brought to the attention of Americans who live abroad. So we are living globally, voting federally, but also very engaged locally. Voter protection, I could talk about this for a very long time, but voter protection is very important for folks who live abroad. It can be sometimes confusing or complicated to vote from abroad. That's why we have an entire website devoted to that. Linda Addison is here today. She's one of the champions of votefromabroad.org. We have an entire website that starts from educating voters, because many voters who are abroad don't know about their right to vote abroad or how to do it. We're also there to make sure that they have any answers to any questions that they may have. We have an entire voter assistance team and Zoom rooms where voters can jump in and get individualized assistance. But we also make sure that the voters, when they actually receive their ballots, many voters will get those by email, that they know how to find them. They can fish them out of their spam box. They can print them, return them, all of the ins and outs of voting. We make sure that that Americans abroad are supported in that, all the way through to returning their ballot, confirming that it's received, and making sure it was counted and cured if possible. So that whole pipeline. And that's the part of the voting process that we're here to protect. And when we do have voters who are unable to get a ballot for whatever reason, whether it's a lack of education of a local voting officer or any other reason, we're here to advocate. And we have whole teams of lawyers who are able to help our voters advocate for their rights. Well, there's many myths about voters abroad, that some people think that our votes aren't counted or that they don't count, but there's a requirement that all of the ballots from abroad are counted, which may be why you see when election results are announced, they may take a little bit longer because our votes are coming in by mail. Whether or not you still own property in the United States or whatever your connection is to the United States, if you're an American citizen who has lived in the United States, you can vote at the last address that you resided at. So I want everybody to know that, because I think all of you know somebody who lives abroad or know somebody who knows somebody who lives abroad. And we're really eager to make sure that everybody who lives abroad knows that they can vote and knows how to do that. Another myth, I can only vote for president. You can actually vote in any federal election, and often down ballot, and there's no voting at the embassy. The embassy and the consulates will sometimes facilitate part of that process, but there's no voting there. And so we actually vote by mail, and we send our ballots back in that way. And we're here to reach not only our own members of Democrats abroad, but really any American who's newly arrived abroad and is aware or not aware of their voting rights. We're here to support those voters. Also, study abroad students will often be voting for the very first time abroad and not realize that they are able to do so. Their universities don't always tell them that. So we're very connected to university programs abroad to make sure that those students get the information that they need. And we're there at the ground at the universities to help them vote. And of course, digital nomads is another group estimated to be 1.7 million US citizens. We want to be sure that they know how to vote as well, and that they actually do so. So here is our website, votefromabroad.org. Please remember this. Anyone who is living abroad who wants to vote can go there, and they can actually request their ballot in the place where they last lived. Whether or not the building is still standing, that is their voting address. And we do need to actually submit a compliant federal form. It's a one-pager to request a ballot. We facilitate all of that on our website, votefromabroad.org. So please, share that with anybody you know who's living abroad, who's planning to live abroad, who knows people who live abroad, or who's a student abroad. That's the site where all of our assistance is located, and where we can facilitate anyone who wants to vote to learn how to get their ballot. So there's a lot of ways that we want to work with those of you who are passionate about getting out the vote. There's many different ways you can do that. As I said, you can let people know about votefromabroad.org. It is the best resource. There are other websites. We're the only website that has voter assistance all the way through voter protection through the whole cycle. Ask you to reach out to your networks, friends and family abroad. We have social media. Please follow us there, and we're always willing to partner with organizations that can bring our message out. So here's some of our social media accounts. Our website, Instagram account, Dems Abroad is where you can find us. And please connect with votefromabroad.org. Again, that's a really unique resource. And we're all over social media there as well. And we say the road to 270 runs through Democrats abroad. So we're here to win elections. Thanks very much. And if there's any questions, happy to answer those.
That is great. Thank you. And we'll open it up to questions. You can put them in the chat. As we're doing that, I just want to add sort of a personal plug. As I worked, as I'm sure many people did, I worked a voter protection hotline in the 2020 election. And I can't tell you how many calls we all got from somebody saying, my child, my cousin, my friend is abroad. How do they vote?
Yes.
And in a lot of cases, not a lot, in at least some cases, as we got towards the end of it and got close to the election, it became too late.
Yeah.
So, for anyone listening, if you have a family member, a friend, if you know anyone abroad and you remember nothing else, please remember at least Dems Abroad. Just say Dems Abroad, they'll figure it out. I just Googled it. If you Google Dems Abroad, you will get to the right place. And from there, you'll be able to get them sorted. While they'll make it as easy as possible, things often do take time. So let's start now.